Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Virginia and I are super excited about our guest.
We are super excited to have our friend Kayla Smith with us on. We're going to talk about some about balancing family and ministry. But first, Kayla, tell us about yourself. Give us an introduction, your background, your passions. Let's start. Tell us some about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Kayla Smith. I am an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene. I have primarily been a children's pastor, and right now my role is Pastor of Intergenerational Discipleship at Trevecca Community Church. I've been a teacher. I got my undergrad in special education, and I taught in Florida for a couple years. But since then, worked in higher education at Trevecca, and then as a children's pastor. I stepped away from ministry full-time in 2019 when my son was born, and just kind of filled in volunteer roles and Sunday school teaching and helping wherever I could at our church at the time. But I also got the privilege to be on the ground floor of developing the Reach Hurting Kids Institute, which is trauma-informed children's ministry, trainings and workshops, and working with Dr. Crosby and Lori and the rest of our team on developing curriculum for churches to reach the hurting kids in their congregations and communities. So I love to do that. I'm, passionate about kids discipleship, about a good cup of coffee, about podcasts that are fun to listen to, being outside, reading good books. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. But yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think it'll be a fun conversation.
Yay.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Kayla, can you tell us a little bit more about that journey that you had from local church ministry into what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was asked to join our church staff in 2016 as their full-time children's pastor. And before then, I had not considered ministry at all. My husband's an ordained elder. He does associate ministry. And I just figured, we're just going to be there at the church helping with whatever until my church asked me if I would step in on this role. And from day one, I knew I was made for this. Like, this is exactly where I need to be, which is such a great feeling, right? When you know that you're exactly made for this work. I enjoyed it a lot. But when I was pregnant with my son, my husband and I had a lot of conversations before we ever even thought about having kids, what we wanted to do when we had kids. And I was really excited about the idea of raising him with me in a pastoral role so that he could see, he could run around the church all the time and he could see wow, this is the work mom does. But I was in a really just a contentious situation. We who've served in the church know that sometimes you realize when it's time to go. And I left a really difficult meeting when I was about 6 months pregnant and had a hard conversation with my husband about I can't give any more of my energy to something that's not going to work, which was really hard to give up because I felt like if I just push a little harder, if I do a little bit more, I can fix this situation. I can make this contention go away. I can be enough if I just do more. But I left that meeting and knew if I'm going to be the kind of mom that I want to be, I have to let something die. So when I was about a week out from having my son, I stepped away from ministry and entered this wilderness season of not being sure if I was even called to ministry. Was it just a temporary thing? Am I done now just to be home? And I loved being home with my child. I thought that was just such a privilege to be able to be with him in that time. But it also was just this really unsettled time of, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next or really who I am. But the Lord provides, right? Just exactly what we need when we need it. Right at the end of my time in full-time ministry, I participated in a research project through our church. They were doing a children's ministry study. It was just a matter of filling out some surveys, and I got a phone call from the lead researcher, Dr. Robert Crosby, and he said that there were a few churches that stood out, and he'd really love to do a site visit. And when could he come out and see the kind of ministry that our church does? And so we coordinated this meetup, and he came and he did interviews with the kids. He did these groups with the kids where he could hear how they experience God in this ministry. And he and I went to lunch, and I was telling him, like, hey, I'm not going to be in ministry anymore, I guess. And I will never forget him saying to me, "You're not done. Maybe the Lord is closing this door so that you can serve even more churches than just this one, so that you can serve the church at large instead of just this local church." And I didn't believe him at the moment. I had my 9-week-old son with me. I didn't believe him. And I just thought, I looked down at my son and was like, well, I mean, I know I'm here to serve him. So I guess maybe someday something. So Robert and I kept in touch. I was curious about the research and where it was going to go. He sent me his articles and the new things he was working on. And when my son was 2, Robert called me and said, I have a really crazy idea, and I'm not going to do this if you won't do this. So what if we were to take the research on trauma-informed ministry and put it into practice with churches? What if we created workshops? What if we made these curriculums and trainings so that churches have access to this information and can put it into practice? Because you know as well as I do that children's pastors are not reading academic articles, right? We don't spend a whole lot of time doing that, right?
Yeah.
So it's taking the academic articles, the absolute gold in this psychological research, and putting it into the hands of pastors. And that was an immediate yes. God has given me the tools and the opportunity and the freedom to develop this with our team. So yeah, I was a full-time pastor. I stepped out of that for the reasons that we talked about. I was available to the work that God had for me because of the margin that was placed in my life. And now I serve as the associate director. We travel to conferences to speak and to share and to hear from people about what's happening in their churches and how we can possibly help. Robert and I write together, and Lori, his wife, who's the therapist of our team, we write together. We're just really excited that God has given us this opportunity, and what a good gift that God would give to me after experiencing this season of like, I guess I'm just not enough. I guess this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
I love hearing your story so much. And I think part of it too is it's just so inspiring to me, because whenever you are in the middle of these changes, whenever God is moving in your life in that way, it's so easy to get so caught up in your own story of like what you said. Okay, because God doesn't give us that, like he didn't say to you with a little sign, hey, I'm moving you from this ministry to this one.
Right.
You know, we don't have that insight. And so we have that faith and we have that trust, but we also have that thing in our minds that are saying we're not enough, or we somehow failed, or why couldn't I fix this? And I've been there before too. And so you have those times where you just say, Lord, you know, what's happening here? Why could I not, you know, accomplish this? But to know that God has a plan and how he takes the things that he's taught us and moves us where he wants us to be. You know, I loved that you said that God had an opportunity for you to serve more churches than the one you were serving. But it takes that step of faith, because if you had tried on your own to keep fixing what you were trying to fix, then you wouldn't have had that opportunity to do what he called you to do next.
Right. Exactly right. And I felt that so heavily of like, why can't I fix this? Why can't I just be enough in this? And I'm trying, and I'm doing everything I can to change myself and to change my philosophy of ministry to fit in this. But when I could let that go, look what God did, you know?
Right.
Another piece of it for me too, is that if Dr. Crosby had appreciated silently, I would not be where I am today. So it's a good reminder to me that when I see something in someone, when I appreciate something in someone, or I feel that nudge of the Holy Spirit to speak life into someone,
Right.
who am I to stay silent? Because my life is transformed, because someone spoke life over me, where what I was hearing, the loudest voice to me was telling me that this was not what God was calling me to do.
Right.
So when I have the opportunity to speak life, I feel like that's so important because of my own experience. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing how God has just unfolded all of this over time. And I think, especially as moms in ministry, we wrestle with that of, you know, what our calling to ministry looks like in relation to our calling to motherhood, in relation to our calling to, you know, the rest of our family. And so I think that's something that we just kind of all wrestle with and ultimately land in different places, and God opens different doors. But that's something that seemed just sort of as a point of conversation, you know, as women who are serving in ministry or maybe like getting ready to have their first child, and they're like, do I continue doing this? Do I step away to, you know, primarily focus on being a mom? And so I think so many just layers to being a mom and ministry. And that, again, God's answers are different for each of us. But I feel like at least over the years, there's been times when people have given me just nuggets of wisdom that I'm so grateful for. Is there something maybe that you have learned personally or someone shared with you that's just good advice or a good nugget of wisdom about balancing family life and ministry as you're serving in ministry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you kind of hit on this a little bit, but there is no one right answer, right? So I really think we need to trust our intuition. My heart was leading me to, what energy do I have? What can I give? Because my energy is a finite resource. If it is a finite resource, then I have some decisions to make about where I will spend it. And I am so grateful for the clarity that came over me of, I cannot give more energy to something that is dying. But what I can do is give more energy to this new life in the world. So I think trusting your intuition is one. Ministry includes the children in your house. It includes the family within your walls. And so if that needs ministry, if that needs energy placed into that, you are irreplaceable in that space. So giving your energy to that is no less ministry than serving in the church as well. But as I've served in the church in different capacities over the last 5 years, what we found to be important is to invite our whole family into ministry. So I mentioned my husband is an ordained elder. He has specific gifts in the church that have been really, really great to see come to fruition in our church. But inviting my son to join us in ministry has been really helpful. Like we just had a conversation on the way to school. Next Wednesday night, our small group is responsible for feeding everyone. And I was like, well, so Eric and I will serve the food, and then Michael will do this. And Owen's like, well, I need to serve the food too, because for him, being involved in the ministry of the church is just what he does. So another piece too, personally, that has been really helpful is that my husband and I have a very egalitarian relationship. He supports me in my ministry. I support him in his ministry. He supports me in my work and my endeavors. I support him in the same way. So at my ordination interview earlier this year, he was asked the question of what does this ministry look like for you? And he said, honestly, right now in this season, my ministry is to support her in her ministry. And having that support right there by my side through this whole thing is invaluable. I mean, what a gift that I can serve knowing that my spouse is in full support of that in whatever capacity it is. So full-time in a church or piecing together whatever ministry looks like from home. So I think just the nuggets would be like, trust your intuition. Nothing is one size fits all. Invite your family into ministry. And do it together. I mean, we can do this together.
I'll never forget that was given to me by a very seasoned music minister. He had been at our church for 30, 35 years or something. And one of the things that he told me early on was, he said, the church will always take as much as you will give it.
Yeah.
And so he said, they're not going to tell you to, just realistically stop serving me, stop serving our congregation, stop serving our church, go to your kids' baseball game or whatever.
Right.
And so I just remember he said, he's like, you've got to set some boundaries, around just like what you're saying, like around your time, around energy, around your family priorities. And so I'll just never forget that, him saying the church will take as much as you will give it, and not in like it's just kind of the nature.
It's the nature of ministry.
This organization and this large body of people. That we have to be clear on where our limits are and where our boundaries are as we serve. And we have to set those.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that was one of the wise things that you were saying, Kayla, when you were talking about when you walked out of that meeting and you were evaluating, because it's really easy. And we mentioned this a minute ago about how it's really easy to say, what can I do more? What's wrong with me? Why can't I? Right. But I think that when we also compare ourselves to others in ministry, we don't think about the situations that we're in at the time. Right. If you had maybe been at a different church in a different circumstance with different leaders, then you wouldn't have come to that same conclusion, because you would have had a different situation you were working with. But we have this tendency in our minds to think, okay, this is ministry. I have to give my all. I have to keep working. I have to keep doing. And so I think that you were very wise in, you have to know, you have to know your situation well and be able to look at it critically. And how do you think you were able to do that? Like what brought you to that realization of, there is a problem here that I cannot fix?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is where it is vital that we develop networks of ministers that are outside of our own context. If I had only my own context to tell me what was happening, I would have known that it was my fault. It was my problem. I have always had a network of ministers that are mentors and ministers that are coworkers and so on, that I am able to say, okay, honestly, this is what's happening. This is how I feel. I'm not sure what's happening next. I don't know where to go with this. I had a lot of coffee dates with friends that I trust. I had a lot of phone calls. One of my best friends was serving in a church in Texas at the time and was going through a similar season of unhealth in her ministry context. And so we were able to swap stories and say, okay, but where was I wrong? And to be fair, like, they were able to speak into me, like, I think you're blowing this out of proportion on certain topics. So we need honesty both ways. No, we don't need somebody to just say, yeah, you're perfect. Everything there was gross and you're the one that was fine. We need full honesty in the situation. But we have to, I think particularly as women in ministry, we have to have outside voices able to speak into that, the truth of what's happening, because we are way too easily swayed. We in ministry in general, not just women, we are too easily swayed by what could be just our isolated context if we don't have other voices speaking into it.
Right. Well, and I think too, because we tend to have, or at least my husband and I were actually talking about this the other night, because I still have a situation in my past that I always question myself about, like one of those things where I still want to say, was it really me, or was I in a difficult situation? And so my husband and I were actually talking about the other night, and I made that statement of how I just had such blind faith that these people were doing what God had called them to do and were going to make the right decisions. And so it's that realization that sometimes those leaders that we look to are not looking at the big picture and doing what Christ has called them to do. And so, but we just have that tendency to just assume, well, they obviously, are doing what is best. And so you really do have to have that ability to be able to look at your situation and say, oh, no, this may not be me here. This actually may be someone else that's making a poor decision, that's not following what the Lord is guiding us to do.
Yeah. And a big help for me in this has been my journey through therapy since then. My therapist offered a really helpful outlook on the situation in saying that they were doing the best with what they had also.
Right.
And so the situations that I was coming up against were deeply troubled, systematic problems. Like it was deep layers, deep layers of, this is the way we've always done things.
Right.
This is the way that we believe faithfulness should look. But having come into it fairly new, I was there for almost 3 years, so not very long, and coming into it from lots of different ministry contexts with that network of people, of men and women believing in me and speaking life into me. I wasn't fitting the context of that deep-seated unhealth. And I mean, it was really hard, just like you said, Val, just the separating myself from it in a sense of, okay, what really is happening? Which piece do I need to hold on to and say, you know what, I am responsible for my attitude. I am responsible for my disrespect. I am responsible for my unforgiveness. I am not responsible for your disrespect, for your unhealth, for your unfaithfulness. Yeah, I'm not responsible for those, so I will not pick them up. It's really hard to do, to say, like, I see all that and I will not pick it up. But what I will do, I think we tend to do one or the other, right? So we're going to either pick up what's not ours, or we're going to say, none of it's my problem. I didn't do anything.
Yes.
But the faithfulness that my therapist walked me through was to say, like, I will hold what was mine and I will deal with my stuff, but I cannot be responsible for what someone else did. But that realization that my energy, my energy, myself, I am a finite resource, and I can't keep doing this. I can't keep trying to sift through what's mine and what's not.
Right. Well, and I think in ministry too, we tend to lean so much towards black and white.
Yeah.
Like you said, all or nothing, right and wrong, which, there's a lot of situations that are, but also I think that life is more nuanced and there's a lot more gray. And so it's that really being able to look at something honestly, like you said, and look at yourself and take, my husband always says that about people being negative on social media when he's talking to people who say, I don't want to have anything to do with social media anymore because of the negativity. And he said, you know what, when somebody is negative, I look at myself and I ask myself, is this, criticism or is this constructive? Like, how, and then I choose to take, I look at myself and then I try to be honest and I take what I can and I let go of what I know is not true. And so it's that same idea of being able to honestly look at yourself and say, okay, I need to take responsibility for this because I did this, but I'm going to let go of this because I know this to not be true. And so,
And I think too, just like what you're saying, having the help of other people and then just the wisdom from God, honestly, just praise the Lord for him giving us insight, being able to sort of zoom out of our situation and look around and be like, okay, I am swimming upstream in something that ultimately I can't control. And so, like talking about these sort of like systemic, cultural problems or top-down leadership problems where you look around and you're like, this cannot be mine to fix because I can't just swim upstream and reverse the course of the stream. The only solution here is to go find another stream and to let the Lord lead and guide into the right place where I'm not swimming against the flow. I'm in where I need to be because the Lord, this is a different situation, a different context. a different whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that the Lord, just like what you're saying, has made me for and has prepared me for. And so having that, being able to zoom out and have that perspective can be so difficult. And you're right, like Valerie's one of my people that I go to speak into me.
I love that.
Hey, like, are they being whacked or am I being whacked? Like, what's going on with this?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need those people. We need to have our people that we can trust. Yeah.
So true.
All right. And in thinking about being intentional to balance our ministry, roles in our ministry life and our family life, are there times where you feel like, man, like, I'm doing this really well? Like, I'm really like dividing my energy well and using my energy well in both areas? Or many times where you felt like it was really unbalanced and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Sure.
Or maybe examples of both, where seasons where you like had your ministry and your family and everything balanced and grooving, seasons where maybe you didn't.
Yeah. So I just told Val this before you got on, Virginia. My son just started school this week. So he's in kindergarten this fall, and they're doing like school boot camp kind of a thing for the next couple of weeks, half weeks. And so I found on Wednesday, like the feelings, y'all, everybody goes through with their kids when this comes. Like I was fascinated that I was overwhelmed, I was sad, but it wasn't about the day of school, and it wasn't about the future of school, but it was looking back at the past 5 years that I've spent at home with him and just realizing like I would do all of this 100 times again if I had the chance. Struggles and all, boredom and all, loneliness and all, lack of sense of ministry, every single piece, I would do every bit of it 100 times again if I had the chance, because it was just so worth it. So I'm not perfect. My family is not perfect, but I would never trade having spent the time that I did with my child. He joins us, like I've said before, he joins us in ministry a lot. He is a prayer warrior. He is a compassionate little boy who just loves his people. One way that I feel like we've really had a lot of guidance from the Lord and from the pastors around us is actually during COVID. So my son turned 1 on March 1st, and then right after that, the world shut down. And my pastor offered this prayer that I wrote down, and I have it on my wall over here, so that I'm just reminded of it all the time. But she said, Lord, show me what is mine to do and give me the grace to let go of what is not mine to do. Help me to see the neighbor you've placed in front of me and give me courage to hold the burden that is mine to hold. And help me let go of all the burdens of the universe, because I am not the one who holds the universe. Show me when there is a child of God right in front of me in need, and may I be unsettled by the not good enough. And that was right at the beginning of COVID shutdown. And so we took that very literally and looked at the neighbors around us and began to build this network through our neighborhood. There are maybe a handful of the 50 houses on our loop that we don't know who lives there, because we have lived into this space, into this time of loving our neighbors with everything we've got. And that includes my son. So when he got home from school on Wednesday, he ran next door to our 80-something-year-old neighbor's house, and he spent an hour on their porch telling them about his day. And then he said, can I go to Jimmy's house? And ran across the street and through the yards over to Jimmy's house to tell Jimmy, who just had back surgery, all about his day, and to sit with him and enjoy a milkshake that his wife brought to them, because he's pastoring this neighborhood. My son has chosen that these are his people that God has given him to love well in this season. And that is the Lord's work. I mean, what a gift to give in the middle of all this isolation, that we found community. In the middle of all of this unsettledness, we settled into this neighborhood in a way that says, like, we need you and you need us, and we will love each other with everything we've got. So in this neighborhood, the majority of the people are unchurched. But they know where to go for prayer, and they know who to talk to about funerals and surgeries, and they know that we'll provide a meal, and they provide us meals, and they just love so deeply. So that's where I feel like we've hit a stride that I hope we never lose. I hope we never lose this sense of pastoring our neighborhood, and being loved well by our neighborhood. Now, we also have started a new ministry at our church that is just very intentional about reaching out to our neighbors at church, which also includes a lot of kids who come to church on the church van, and their families are not involved, and they're brand new to this culture of being in the church. And it is hard. It is really hard, and we love it. And this is where I am still, like, even now, like, figuring out the balance of what does it look like to be mama, and what does it look like to be Papa Kayla? Because there are lots of times where I'm dealing with a very dysregulated situation. A few weeks ago, I was holding my son, trying to take him to preschool ministries where I teach. And there was a situation with elementary students where we had 3 or 4 who really just needed extra support in their dysregulation. And I had another preschooler by the hand, and I'm holding Owen, and I'm looking around like, I don't even know where to start. And so much needs to get done. So right now, I think is my season of like, I don't know that we're doing this well, but we're giving it all we've got, and praise God for the patience of kids that comes across sometimes, the compassion that they can have. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out what it looks like to be mama and pastor in this season too.
Oh, yeah. And I love what you shared about your neighborhood. I mean, what a wonderful just way to raise your son, and what a wonderful thing to instill in him. What a wonderful way to give him a general community and support, and people love him too. So I like teared up as you're sharing that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
Well, and I think that's just such a great thing that you are bringing him into your ministry, because I think that that's the hard thing. And I look back because now, my daughter's grown, and she not only grew up with me being the children's minister at our church, but also I was the principal of her school.
Oh, wow.
Because our church had we had a Christian school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looking back, I love that, because I feel like so many times she had to kind of look at me as mom slash, principal slash children's minister. This is mom's ministry. We're supporting mom, kind of. And I don't know that I did as well doing what you were talking about, where I made her feel more included. I mean, she did. It's like you said, she grew up in that church building and running around the building and being there, 24/7, and it being our entire world, because it was our school and our church.
Yeah.
But also, I love that you are including your son in the ministry and helping him grow in his discipleship.
Yeah.
Alongside of you. So it's not, this is what mom and what dad does, but this is what our family does.
Absolutely. It is one of my deepest passions for kids to be seen as co-pilgrims on the way. We are walking together, and they are being discipled and discipling us equally. So even on the way to school today, I was asking Owen what I could be praying about for him today. And he gave me a few things that I could pray about. And I was like, so when you think of it through the day, could you pray for me in these things? And he's like, yep, I will do it. Because I mean, it matters to give children agency in their discipleship, to believe that they can, and that they are called, and that they are compassionate today, the way they are today. There is nothing in him that thinks that it's weird that his buddies are adults around the neighborhood, kids around the neighborhood. He has equal access to the people in his life, because he is worthy of that. So I think that the challenge that's going to come up as he gets older, that we're trying to be aware of, is that we not impose on him that this is a must, that he has to do this, that his worth is tied to his willingness to join us in ministry, because it's not. We just want to be sure that he has equal access to all of it. I don't want to push him too hard, that he feels like, oh my gosh, my parents have always made me whatever. So that's where I'm going to need my mentors and friends to keep me in check as he gets older, so that he not feel like this is just what he has to do to receive our love and affection.
Well, and I think it's just so hard. It's hard being a child in ministry, I think, because there is so much attention brought to, okay, you are the children's minister's child. These are our expectations of you and who you are supposed to be, how you're supposed to behave, and what you're supposed to do. And I think if I ever, and I've mentioned this in episodes before, if I ever kind of look back, I do think that a lot of times I did put my schedule with ministry ahead. And I wish that I had allowed myself to spend more time as mom than I did over the time. But also, I think I did allow myself to worry a little too much about what do people think about her behavior, or about the way she handles things, or the way she says things, or what she does. And so I always tried to not have that sense of like, oh, my child would never do anything wrong. But I think sometimes I went a little too far the other way, where I would say, I would worry too much about people watching her and her, where I wish that I'd stepped up as mom a little bit more often than I did as children's minister or as principal. And so it is really hard to balance those things.
Yeah, I think living our personal discipleship faithfully in front of our children is one of the things that I heard it at the Children's Spirituality Conference a few years ago of Jared Patrick Boyd offered this talk of like, the most important thing you can do is live your faith honestly in front of your kids. Struggles and all, questions and doubts, all of it, just living it in front of your kids in age appropriate ways, to say the part of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I feel like a pastor right now. I don't know if I made the right choice. I don't know where to go next, so that they can see that this is what faith looks like. And faithfulness is following the Lord, even in the middle of all of that. Yeah, it's quite a calling to be both a parent and a pastor, and try to figure out how to balance both of those. Thankfully, we can trust that God is faithful, and in our mess can find grace and maybe create something even more beautiful through that.
Well, Kayla, can you tell us how we can connect with you online?
Absolutely. So you can reach me by email at kayla@reachhurtingkids.com. You can find our website, Reach Hurting Kids Institute, that's reachhurtingkids.com, and learn a little bit more about that work. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. That's Kayla McMahon Smith. I would be more than happy to connect with all of you kids ministry people, because that's what we need. We need a network. So that would be great.
Oh, that's great. Well, Kayla, this has been so much fun. We have enjoyed talking with you so much. I think it's a really important topic that we discussed. I think we have a lot of children's ministers that are struggling with these same things that listen. So we are so thankful for you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
And friends, as always, we are so grateful that you have spent time with us, that you've taken your valuable time to spend with us. And we just ask that you would like and subscribe and all the things. If you have questions, topics that you'd like us to discuss, please contact us. We would love to be able to meet you where you are and help you in any way we can with your ministry. We have had such a great time talking with everyone today, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Bye-bye.